Let me tell you something. A narcissist is never afraid of weakness. They seek it, they manipulate it, they feed on it with a charming smile and calculating eyes. But there is one thing that makes them lose sleep, tremble in silence, and slowly fall apart. It's someone who used to be weak but is now awakened. A super empath. The one who once cried for them is now silent. The one who used to apologize for being too sensitive now sets ruthless boundaries. The one who once loved deeply now looks at them with calm detachment. No more expectations, no more emotional supply to offer. That is the kind of punishment a narcissist never saw coming. Not loud, not violent, not humiliating, just indifference. In today's video, I'll show you exactly what happens inside a narcissist's mind when they're finally mirrored by someone they thought they could control forever. Someone who's no longer playing the victim but has become the mirror, reflecting everything they've spent their life trying to hide. This isn't just a battle of emotion. This is a reversal of power. And when it happens, the narcissist has nowhere left to hide. A narcissist always believes they're the one in control. They smile when you're in pain. They manipulate when you doubt yourself. And they survive by keeping you endlessly trying to fix something that was never yours to fix in the first place. They're used to your reactions. They're used to your forgiveness. They're used to your return even after they've pushed you to the edge. But then one day, you change, not with screaming, not with rage, not with begging, but with stillness and clarity. You no longer chase explanations. You no longer need them to understand you. You no longer live to please someone who never intended to understand you in the first place. And that moment, that quiet, conscious step back, is the moment the entire game flips. The super empath no longer absorbs pain. They start to observe, to reflect, to draw boundaries. And to the narcissist, that is an unspoken nightmare. They start to panic. Why aren't you reacting? Why don't your eyes beg for acknowledgement anymore? Why don't you need them? The answer is simple. Because you've awakened. And that awakening, without a single scream, hurts them more than any rage ever could. They don't know how to face you when you're no longer emotionally available. They don't know how to keep acting when the audience has left the theater. They don't know how to survive. When you've cut off the supply they once fed on, you don't have to attack them. All you have to do is stop responding. And for someone who lives for your reactions, that is the most brutal form of torture. And that's exactly when it all begins. The silence, the shift. For the very first time, the narcissist feels something they've never been prepared to face your absence, even while you're standing right in front of them. They won't say it out loud, but they feel it deeply. A void opening, power slipping, truth rising to the surface, breaking through the mask they've fought so hard to maintain. The game they once dominated is beginning to turn against them. The first sign is confusion, not yours, but theirs. They can't understand why their old tactics no longer work. The manipulation that once made you question your sanity, you now name it for what it is, calmly and clearly. The guilt trips, the silent treatments, the emotional threats, none of it lands anymore. They wait for pain in your eyes, for cracks in your armor. But your eyes no longer plead. They no longer search for validation or beg to be loved. They simply hold still. And that stillness, that piercing clarity, is what terrifies the narcissist the most. Because what they truly feed on has never been love. It's been your emotional response. Your reaction is their lifeline. Anger, sadness, confusion, desperation. Any sign that they still matter to you. But now, you're not giving them anything. And to them, your silence isn't absence, it's annihilation. They'll try again. They'll say you've changed, that you've become cold, distant, selfish. But the truth is, they're not mourning your warmth. They're mourning the loss of control. For a narcissist, love was never about connection. It was about possession. And once you walk away from that dynamic, you become something they can't grasp. You are no longer the prey. You've become the mirror that reflects the truth they've spent a lifetime avoiding. When a narcissist begins to sense they're losing control, They don't surrender quietly. They struggle. They reach. They will do everything they can to pull you back in just a flicker of your old emotion is enough to convince them that they still matter, that they still exist inside your world. And they won't hesitate to use their most manipulative tricks. First comes the apology. But it's not true remorse, it's strategy. Suddenly, they understand everything. They'll say they've reflected, that you were the only one who ever truly loved them. They may even cry. But those tears aren't from regret. They are the panic of someone afraid of losing their favorite source of supply. And when that doesn't work, they flip the script and play the victim. They'll tell others you were cruel, that you changed, that you ruined the relationship. They'll distort the truth, twist the story, plant doubt, not because they're heartbroken, but because they're losing power. And when all else fails, they'll resort to chaos. They might create a crisis just to get your attention, an accident, a health scare, a family emergency, anything to reawaken the compassion they used to manipulate. But this time, you don't answer. Because now you understand, compassion is not submission. Forgiveness does not mean return. And loving yourself is the most courageous act you've ever done. Your silence now is not a wound. It's a boundary, a shield, a declaration. I no longer belong to where I once was. And to a narcissist, that is the cruelest punishment, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because they've lost something they thought they'd never lose. Your loyalty, your love, and the unconditional forgiveness they once took for granted. At some point, when every tactic fails, when there's no way left to manipulate you, the narcissist is forced to face the one thing they fear most, themselves. There's no longer a mirror reflecting your softness for them to mold. No more confusion, no more explanations, no more participation from you. All that remains is emptiness. The same emptiness they've always tried to fill with you. And when there's no one left to blame, no strings left to pull, they begin to unravel. Not because you hurt them, but because you've stopped allowing them to hurt you. Your awareness, your stillness becomes a mirror that reflects the cracks in their soul, the place they've long avoided, denied, and covered up with control. You no longer need apologies. You no longer need closure. You don't need to win, and you don't need to be understood. Because you've already won, you've won yourself back. You've stepped out of the cycle, not with screams, but with silence, not to prove anything, not to be validated, but to find peace. And to someone who lives off chaos and intensity, that peace is a total collapse. They don't know how to exist without drama, without control, without the emotional mess to manipulate. Now they're left only with themselves, an empty ego with no anchor. And you, the one who once nourished all their illusions, are gone, not by running, but by standing still and choosing never to be consumed again. And then, when all has fallen silent, when the storm of chaos and control has faded into nothing but echoes from the past, the super empath steps into a new chapter of their life. Not as someone who constantly heals others, but as someone who has finally learned to heal themselves. No longer searching for someone to understand, no longer waiting for an apology. No longer hoping for a miracle from someone who never intended to change. They begin turning inward, tending to the parts of themselves they once abandoned just to please others, and for the first time they choose themselves. They rebuild step by step with only what is true. Peace is no longer a luxury, it becomes the baseline. Clarity is no longer something they're shamed for, labeled as too sensitive. It becomes the light that guides every relationship moving forward. They learn to love again, but this time starting with themselves. They give, but no longer to be emptied. They forgive, but never forget the boundary. They say no and feel no guilt. And with every step they take toward the light, the narcissist fades deeper into the shadows of irrelevance, not because the empath hates them, but because they no longer need them to feel whole. The true power of a super empath doesn't lie in defeating the narcissist. It lies in walking away from the game the narcissist tried to trap them in forever. They no longer prey. They don't need to be a predator. They are free from expectations, from manipulation, from love laced with lies. And in that silence, in that surrender, they become more radiant than ever before. That's the part a narcissist will never understand. You didn't walk away because you stopped loving. You walked away because you finally learned to love without having to suffer for it.